Hello, I'm here. Forgot to check the sound, so we're gonna check that real quick. Let's see. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. All right. It should be working.
Today is the day that Pico, oh my gosh. Honey, did you have to do that? Okay. Well, Pico is going to his new homes.
Hmm. Let me know when you sure. All right. Today we're working. I was gonna try and get a third block done, but that didn't work. I'm sorry. Yesterday did not go according to plan. I was going to be in the studio all day and I did nothing but I did everything but be in the studio yesterday. And by the time I was done at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was hurting. So yeah, no, didn't get much done yesterday at all that I wanted to. But I'm going to try this week to get 3 or 4 more blocks done so we can kind of double up because we don't have too many more. There's only 25, there's 25 blocks total for this quilt. And we're on block 17 and 18, so we should get it done pretty quickly. So after today, we've got uh 7 more. Not too bad. Um, what else? We have until Wednesday to everybody to vote on the next Quilt Works pattern that we're gonna do, which I'm super excited about. Okay, but for now, let's get to these blocks. All right, let's see. We're on block 17. Okay. We've done everything in this block before except for these shot what is it? Shaded 4 patch is what they call these corner blocks here. So I wanted to show you. We've done these, the flying geese, square and a square. We've done all of that many, many times. For the shaded 4 patch, you are going to take 2 strips of fabric and sew them together, kind of like this. Okay. You're going to have a thin one and a wider one. Then you're going to cut off into 2 sets of what they tell you the size is. I'm not going to tell you unless you have the pattern. So you have a small square and a rectangle. We're going to sew those together. Okay, they're opposite. And I will tell you, I physically laid them down according to the picture and the pattern to make sure I sew on the correct side, because it does make a difference if you don't. These will be opposite and you don't want that. Once you sew these together, what I do is I fold it in half before I even iron it. And right here in the center, you want to cut the seam. So we're not going to go all the way to the stitching. We're just going to cut the seam. And what that does is that allows you then to iron this. See where I've cut the seam right here? To iron it flat going both sides. So we want to iron it towards the larger rectangle, and the seam will lay flat because we've cut it. So you don't want to cut all the way to the stitch. You don't want to cut the stitching. You want to cut shy of the stitching. Does that make, hopefully that makes sense for you guys. So let me iron this now. Oh, I forgot to start heating up my iron again, as usual. I hope you're enjoying this quilt. I'm having a lot of fun making this one. And I liked the way the blocks were laying out when I took a picture of them all. Now this quilt, forget, let me wait for my iron to heat up. Let's see. How big is this quilt gonna be? I forgot. Let me see if it's in my other file. Hmm. Give me just a second. Let me see. Hmm. Mm. 91 by 91 once this is finished. So it's going to be a good size quilt. And I think this is going to work on my bed if I enlarge the border. So this one's going to be 91 by 91. And I'm thinking if I enlarge any of these borders to give me, or add another border to it, it'll make it a king size. But that's what we're looking for at the end. All right. Okie dokie. I just had to remind myself. All right. So here's the next step. No, wrong one. The next step is you're going to have a rectangle, square, whatever it is. It's going to be bigger than the piece that you create, that you just finished creating. See how nice and flat it goes? You want to iron your seams towards your rectangles. You're going to lay it right sides together on your rectangle or square, which is going to make up this piece right here, this this part. Once you do that, then we're going to take a ruler and a pen. There it is, nice and pretty. I do put a couple of pins out here in the square part just to hold it together. It's going to be bigger than you need, and so we're going to trim it up, and that's not an issue, but I just don't like it when they move around, so I use flat pins. You're going to grab your regular cutting ruler that has the 45-degree angle, and I put wrong way. There we go. All right. I've got the 45-degree angle over here, so my angle is this way, okay? And I'm going to line that 45-degree mark on the ruler, or line this edge of the ruler up with the little seam here where they connect. So we've got a seam coming here, and we've got a seam coming here. Right where they connect, that's where I want, or just, you know, a thread width above it. I've got my 45 on this edge, and I'm just gonna move it over just a little bit, and I'm gonna draw a line. Hopefully you'll be able to see this line. And I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. I've got my 45 on the edge of my fabric here. I'm moving it over just so it's like a thread width towards the inside of that seam where they join. Okay. Now what you're going to do is you're going to sew on both of these lines. You want to make sure you're just, when you draw your lines, you're a thread width away from, you don't want to be directly on that seam point, because then when we sew on the line, it's going to look like this. You don't want to cut your point off there. So when I sew this, I'm going to have this facing up so I can see exactly where that line is. And I think I went a little too far because I drew on it. Let's see, hold on, let me just update that real quick. That's a little bit closer, better. Hi. Yes, I've got two lines now, but I'll know where to sew them. Can you make out? See how the line is going just as close to that seam joint without going over. And we're going to sew on both of these lines and cut down the middle, and we'll have two of these shaded 9 patches when we're done that we're going to have to trim up. So we're making 2 of these. All right. Start sewing. And if you're not sure how to do this, or you want to learn to get even better, there's a shaded 4-patch technique sheet. Let me see. Let's do it this way. Okay, that's going to show you exactly how big and how to cut it, how to get your designs. And then we have another one. Actually, I'll show it over here. Hold on. Okay. So we have the technique sheet. This is laminated already, 3-hole punch, just for the shaded 4 patch. And there's another one that's a little bit more intricate. That's the shaded 9 patch. And it's going to give you all the sizes to cut everything and walk you through the whole entire process, start to finish. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong one. Sorry, let's try that again. It's one of those days today. So here's the shaded 4-patch technique sheet, and it's going to give you the size at the top there. There's a whole table to show you exactly what to cut, what size to cut everything. And it goes from a 2-inch finish block down to a 12-inch finish block. We also have this in for the shaded 9 patch, and it literally walks you through every single step and gives you some ideas on where you would use it and what you can do with this block. All of these blocks are made from this one unit. It's pretty cool. And then we have the shaded 9 patch too. All right. Let's try this again. Sorry, my brain is just not, I don't know, it's just not with it today. I think I'm still tired. I got up very, very early this morning, earlier than normal. And yesterday was a very strenuous and busy day. A lot busier than I normally would have it, I can tell you that. Now I'm going to turn it around and sew on the other one. And I'm making sure I don't cross over the where they line where the seam's showing, because I don't want to cut off the point of my square. All right. I don't know why. It's got to be because I'm tired. I had such a busy day yesterday. Reason why I'm off. Sorry. Okay. So I've sewed on both sides. Now, all I'm going to do is take my ruler and I'm going to put it the 1/4 inch mark roughly on my stitch line and just cut down the center. There you go. Now it looks wonky, and I'm going to iron my seam towards my triangles. They do look wonky, but once we're done ironing, we're going to trim them up to this exact size that we need. Hope you're all doing well. I had a little bit of a weird thing happening yesterday. We got a lot of wildfires and controlled burns around here. I'm literally surrounded by them, and it was very windy yesterday. So we had a lot of smoke. You could smell the fires burning, and we had falling ash out of the sky. So it wasn't fun. I think that's the first time that I've ever seen that in my entire life, anywhere. So it was a little weird. And poor Nola was very anxious all day going outside. Very anxious. She was not a happy camper. She did not want to be outside for nothing or no one. And it was like that almost all day until late afternoon yesterday, and it started clearing up. And it wasn't smelling as bad. It wasn't as windy. We didn't see as much smoke. you know, when you have a fire and you get that haze, it was pretty bad. But this morning, it's fine. Thank goodness. I'm very happy because I don't like dealing with that. Okay. Now you're gonna grab your trimmer, your Tucker trimmer. And I forget how big I gotta cut these. Hold on. Hold on. I think I know, but I want to make sure. Okay. Now I know what I'm doing. So again, 1/2 inch markings on that side, whole numbers on this side. I'm going to start with, let me just double check something just because. Yeah. Okay. I was right. Sometimes, you know, you never know. So what I'm going to start with is these blocks I'm going to cut down to 4.5. So I want my 4.5 diagonal line on my seam. And I want to make sure that this diagonal line goes right through those 2 points. At the same time, I'm making sure that I've got 4.5 inches extra, you know, and more on all 4 sides. So then I'm going to cut this side. So I always start with this square up top first. And you got to be consistent, okay? So if you don't want to start there first, that's fine. You can start this way, but make sure you cut all of these in the same direction. Because if not, you're going to run the risk of possibly these not being exactly the same. Meaning the squares, when you're done, this square here can be a little bit different size in all of the in all of the blocks. So whatever you're going to do, just do the same for the entire block. And if you're going to make an entire quilt with this block, cut it the same way. Then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to use this 4.5 inch mark. And just double checking that this diagonal line is going through that point and my 4.5 inch diagonal line here is right on my seam. And then I'm going to cut up my other side. There you go. There's your block. So let's see. Oh, I got one more to cut up. So we'll do this one. Same thing. Yes, you're getting rid of a little bit of fabric. You're wasting a little bit of fabric, but doing it this way, every block is going to be the size that you need it. And there aren't going to be any wonky blocks. That's one of the best things I love about Deb Tucker's rulers and patterns. Anybody can do these. As long as you learn how to use the rulers and you're consistent, you'll be just fine. Right. There you go. Now we can put this quilt together, this quilt block. So this is going to go here, here, and here. So I've already put the bulk of it together. I'm going to put these together and then we will be ready to go. Actually, let me show you something. I want to make sure I don't cut this point off. Okay. These should fit perfectly together. And what I want to do is just make sure my two seams are together, are lined up. And you can see them when you look, you can tell. And I'm just going to put a pin there. And then I'm going to actually sew it from this side. And I want to make sure, see where these two seams cross? You have one stitch line right there and one stitch line right there. So on that wonky X, I want to make sure when I come and stitch down the side that I am a thread width on this side of that X. That will make sure that you do not cut off your points. Let me see if I can make it a little bit darker for you. I don't know if I can. Yeah, that might. See the X where my seams are? I just want to make sure I'm a thread width on this side of that X. If you stitch on this side of the X, that's when you're going to cut that point off right there. All right, time to sew. Oops. Mhm. There we go. Perfect. Now I'm going to put this side on. Actually, I can go over just another stitch. Sometimes if I'm not paying attention, I'll shortchange myself and bring this too much over that there's a gap. So I don't want that. It's a fine line between making sure that these line up and you don't cut off that point. All right. And now I'm going to put the other side on. So this is going this way. This one has to go on the side. And I'm just going to make sure that these line up. There we go. Let's see. Not too bad. It's slightly off, but I don't think it's going to be that noticeable in the long run. I should have done a better job of pinning it. Yeah, maybe I will. I probably will fix that. Yeah, I will. You know, unfortunately, I am my worst enemy. And I tell all of you, done is better than perfect. But sometimes I know I can do better. And sometimes it's just a matter of not unstitching the whole seam, but you can unstitch a few stitches before and a few stitch after and just adjust that one point, if that makes sense. I would see it, and I know I preach all the time for you guys to just relax and go with the flow, but I'm my worst enemy. All right, let's try that a little bit better. It's a little bit better. Good enough. Okay. Now, I'm going to iron both of these seams open. Okay, there is a lot of points coming together and seams, so ironing the seam open at this point will help you put it together, and hopefully it will lay flatter. You won't have any bulky points. Now we're almost done. So now all we're going to do is line up our seams. And with since both these seams here and these here are open, it's a little bit more difficult for you to line it up because you don't have nesting seams. So let me show you how I do that. I'm going to take my little ruler, and I'm going to draw a 1/4 inch mark on this seam. 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to do on the back of this one again. I'm going to use those marks to pin and line up this last part of this block. Now I can take a pin. I'm going to go through the seam at the 1/4 inch mark here. Go through the seam at the 1/4 inch mark here. And I'm going to hold my pin straight up and down. Pin those two in place before I take the pin out. Again, I'm going to go into the 1/4 inch seam mark right there. And then through the front to the 1/4 inch seam mark right there. And hold them to the pin up and down. Nice and vertical, straight, before I put another pin in and take this pin out. Now, you've got 2 points that you can cut off here if you don't watch what you're sewing. I'm going to sew it from, let's see, let me just, this side. So I can watch this seam right here. And the other thing we're gonna line up is this seam and this seam. Here we go. Make sure you get as neat with your seams as you can. I'm not saying they have to be perfect because there is no such thing as perfect. But if you spent all this time pressing your seams, you want to make sure they stay where you pressed them. Oops. Let's see. Not too shabby, if I do say so myself. There we go. Block 17. I'm a little close, but I still didn't cut that point off. I'm happy. I'm good. Very good. Okay, let's go to block 18. Now, block 18 has something new that I want to show you. Let me get it set up. Mhm. Oops. All right. So I'm not going to go over the shaded 4 patch again because we did that just in the last block. But what I want to teach you next is how to make this quarter square. What's it called? It's got an official name and I forget. It's called the non-mirror combination unit. And again, like everything else, we do have a technique sheet for it. That really does help a lot because the directions are a little bit vague. That's why I wanted to show you. And it'll give you the exact step by step on how to do it. I have a ton of these sheets and they really do help me out a lot. So what I'm going to show you, it looks like we're doing right side triangles. So I've got 2 fabrics, right sides together, and I've drawn a line going diagonally through the squares. Okay, now what we're gonna do, you could, if you had the, what's it called? The, quarter inch, not the quarter inch ruler, the Quilter's Magic Wand, put it here and draw a line on both sides. If you don't have it, then just draw one line. I'm going to put my quarter inch foot with a guide on here. Actually, okay, let's do it this way. There's a couple of ways. You've got a center line, and then I'm gonna do a quarter of an inch line on either side. I think I'll be able to show you a little bit easier doing it this way. It's a little bit weird one, but I think you'll get it. All right, what I want to do, I'm going to use a different color. Let's see. Let's see if the orange works. Okay, yeah, that works. What you want to do, now that you have these marks, we're going to be cutting on the center line, but we only are going to sew on this line here, going all the way down. And then we're going to go sew over this line and then back down to this line. We're going to do a zigzag. Okay. And then we're going to take it out of the machine and we're going to do the same thing on this side. So we're going to sew on this line. And then we're going to sew here and go back here. Hopefully that makes sense. When I sew these, I'm going to turn it around so you can see the white on the blue. Maybe that'll help you. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to go sew down this line. I'm going to turn it, sew over the center and down this line. Then I'm going to take it out of the machine and turn it. And I'm going to sew down this line over the center and come back down. Or actually not over the center. I'm sorry. We're going to go over this line. Disregard the center because we want to be able to cut through the center. So we're going to sew all the way down to this line, over and back down. And on this side, we're going to sew all the way down to this line, over and back down. Hopefully it will make some sense when I finish sewing it. So I sewed down here all the way to this bottom line, sewed over and came down. And here I sewed down to this bottom line, over and came down. It looks weird. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Again. So I sewed down this line to this bottom line, came over and then sewed down. And over here, I sewed down this bottom to this bottom line, came over. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I messed up. Hold on. I just realized I messed up. Hold on. Let me rip this out. That's why you got to draw the lines on there. I'm telling you. And my little arrows. It's the only way to remember what you're supposed to be doing. Hold on. All right. Yeah, that's better. Much better. Hold on and I'll show you what I did. I just got to get this thread out. All right. Now it looks a little bit more, makes sense. It'll kind of look like a pinwheel, which is what we're going to be creating in the long run. All right. So I came down, sewed here, over to here, and down. And this one I came down, sewed over here and down. Let's try this again. Can you see the kind of half pinwheel in there? So let's see what I sewed. I sewed here, down, and down. And this one I sewed here, over, and down. Now we're going to cut it right on that middle line. If you try to do this with like, half square triangles, you're only going to get half of the blocks that you need to, because we need the fabric colors to be in the same spot, not opposite. I'll show you what I mean. We need, see how this navy is in the same spot in all of these blocks. If you try to do it with half square triangles, you're going to have two blocks that look like this and two blocks that look the mirror image where they're backwards. So when you iron these open, I always iron them to the dark side. And then you're going to have a square of this that we're going to cut once diagonally, and that makes the other side of this block. Okay. Now, once you sew all of them together, then you've got to trim them up. I know we've done this plenty of times before, but I'm going to do it again. And again, just like we did the shaded 4 patch, I want you to do them the same way, in the same direction when you start. So my 3.5 inch line is right on the seam here. The diagonal line is coming right through the center there. I've got more than 3.5 inches going all the way around. There's one side. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to use my 3.5 inch ruler, this part square this way. Make sure my 3.5 inch diagonal line is on my seam, and make sure this diagonal line is on this seam. I highly recommend picking up the technique sheet for this. Okay. And I have some of these still in stock. It's the non-mirrored, it's called the non-mirrored combo unit. Honestly, trying to remember to do this block without this technique sheet is difficult even for me to remember. So I would highly recommend you picking it up. All right, we're almost done with this block. So let's see. What I'm going to do, because I've already done this side and I've done half of this, I'm going to sew these two together and then sew this flying geese to this one. Will be my center row, and then I'll sew this part on here. So first thing I'm going to do is sew these two together. The nice thing is, because of how we ironed it, we've got a perfect nesting seam right here. So I'm going to make sure that this is nice and flat, and I'm going to sew right down the line. See? And this one I didn't even pin. I just got it where I needed it to go and then put it in the machine and sewed. So it's a perfect nesting seam. This seam is going towards the right. The bottom seam is going towards the left. It's a nice point. So as long as you make sure that it squares up here and both of those seams nest together, you can feel them. It'll be nice. It'll line up really nicely. Oh, it doesn't want to play today. And my problem is I really don't like my Husqvarna Viking that I have, my extra machine. So I kind of just am trying to baby this machine, so I keep on using it. There you go. So that nice point. And we've got a 1/4 seam on the top so that we can connect it. Now this one, I iron the seams open. I'm tired today. I'm just off. Yesterday I was a very physically busy and strenuous day. I was hurting, my knees were hurting by the time I got done. But I'm really loving my hydraulic cart a lot. There you go. Now, put these together. It's very simple. You've got 2 points here to line up, even though the seams are open. And you've got a 1/4 inch space here and a 1/4 inch space here. So they should line up beautifully. And all I do is I'm going to put my needle right in the seam at the point there and go through the point here in the seam. just like we've been doing. Hold the needle straight up. Put the pin in, and then you can take your pin out. And then we're gonna sew it down. I'm gonna make sure, either way, you're gonna hit a point, but if you sew with this on top, how do I explain this? Okay. I just put the needle through the point on the back side of the fabric pieces. If you don't go past that point or too far past that point, and so right on that point, you will be perfectly fine without cutting these points off, and everything will line up nice. See this little triangle it makes? These pieces? So when I sew, I want to be right at the tip of that point going all the way across when I hit this seam. And that will make sure that I don't cut off my points on the front of the block. Let me see if I can get a little closer. This little point, the little triangle that it's, when it's sewn together, make sure you hit just at that line. Maybe a thread width on this side, but no more than that. Oh, crap. You're not seeing it. No, you're not seeing it. Okay, trust me, it's right here. There is a little triangle. So we want to make sure we are at least on that line when we come down, or a thread width, just, you can go as much as a thread width into the block this way, but no more than that. You do not have a 1/4 inch foot with a guide on your machine, I highly recommend that you purchase one. It will make your life so much easier when you're piecing. Because 1/4 inch seams is what makes aligning all of these blocks up easier. If you get consistent on your 1/4 inch seam, you will be a happier camper. There you go. Can't get better than that. Now, I would iron this seam open again, just because of all the points in the center. Almost done. I am sorry if I'm babbling, and I'm sorry I can't find my words. It took a lot out of me yesterday, especially when I started the day with a plan of being in this studio all day and relaxing. But one thing led to another. I happened to look at my email and I saw Harbor Freight was having a sale. Not that they always have a sale, but I saw a 15% off coupon for that I could use on that hydraulic lift cart. I went and grabbed it because it's gonna save me a lot of trouble. All right, let's piece this final section for the center. Again, I'm going to go into the point at the flying geese and at the point where this block ends in the seam, or the point where the non-mirrored combo unit. All right, I'm gonna hold my pin up and down vertically. If you push it this way or lay it down this way or any other angle other than vertically straight up and down, you're moving your seam and it's not going to line up. So again, I got my pin in between my fingers and I'm holding it straight up and down. I'll put my other pin in and then you can take this one out. And it does not matter which side you sew it on, you're going to have a point either way. Meaning we don't want to cross this X on this side. We want to stay on that side. Same thing over here, just so we don't cut our points off. And if you've watched any of these videos, I know I'm repeating a lot of these techniques, but it takes a little bit of time and repeat to get really good at this. And it took me a long time. I used to cut off my flying V's and points all the time until I figured out exactly where I have to sew. So practice, and more practice will make you a better quilter. I won't say perfect because there is no such thing as perfect in quilting. Sorry. Nobody's perfect. You just got to go by the 20-20 rule. So if you can look at it from 20 feet away, I actually can come just a little bit closer. I do this often. I'll tell you that right now. I stitch myself shorter because I'm afraid of cutting my points. And then I'll go back and do another stitch because I was too far off. But the 20-20 rule, if you can look at it from 20 feet away, riding horseback, going 20 miles an hour, and you don't see anything wrong, guess what? There ain't nothing wrong. There you go. I'm going to iron this seam open, and then we'll get putting the rest of the block together. You just got to let some of it go because 99% of the time, nobody's going to see your mistake or what you think is a mistake. Everybody's going to love it. And you'll probably be a little bit happier quilting if you don't try to be perfect. Because it's exhausting if you got to keep unstitching, ripping them out, lining them back up again, stitch it again. It's just not, it can be tiring. And honestly, it's not fun. It might be fun for you, but it's definitely not fun for me. I don't like Jack the Ripper. He's a pain. That's what I call my seam ripper. I don't like it. So I try not to use it if I don't have to. All right. Next. Almost done. We've just got to put this part of the block on this row. And now this is going to line up very nicely because we have a nesting seam. So we've got the bottom seam going towards the right and the top seam going towards the left. So I am just going to line them up and then I'm going to feel it. You can feel it when it's nice and flat. It just fits together perfectly. I'm not even going to pin this. If you want to pin it, by all means, go right ahead, make yourself more comfortable. I am just going to sew it. Mm. Here it is. See with that nesting seam, how much it makes a nice point when you line it up correctly. All right, I'm going to iron this seam open also. And then we will put this one on and we will be done. Almost done. No, we've got 3 more seams. 2 more seams. Yeah, 2 more seams. All I know is I'm ready for the weekend. My 1 day off tomorrow. And it might start this afternoon. I get to play with some Legos again. I like Legos. I'm having fun. I'm glad I can tell you right now that there's no more flying ash around. Every time I went outside yesterday, there was ash everywhere. It wasn't nice. It was scary. And I know Nola hated it. She could tell that there was something not quite right. And I think the smell bothered her. It made her anxiety go through the roof. Okay, let's get these lined up. I'm almost done. There's a lot to line up here. You have a lot of opportunities. The only problem is you've got all these open seams. So you got to do the one extra step to get them lined up well. This one might, okay. We'll use this one. So I'm going to put a 1/4 of an inch mark over this seam. And a 1/4 of an inch mark. I don't even have to do a 1/4 inch mark there because that's the 1/4 of an inch where that point is. All right. Put the pin in the seam at the 1/4 of an inch mark. In the seam at the tip of the point. Hold the pin straight up and down. There you go. That's one. We have this point here and that point there. I'm going to through the point at the flying geese. Hit this point at the seam. Hold the pin up and down. Yes, I know it sounds like I keep repeating myself. Unfortunately, that happens with a lot of these blocks because you're doing basically the same thing. So I'm going into the seam at the 1/4 of an inch mark that I drew and hitting my point right there. And this one, this side too. Into the seam at the 1/4 of an inch mark. Into the point, just above the point in the seam right there. I don't want my seams to get folded back. So I want to be careful how I put it in there. There. Okay. Holding my pin up and down vertically. There we go. Into the point of the flying geese. And the point on the tip, the corner. Let's see. Into the seam at the 1/4 inch mark. And finally, into the point there. Here we go. Let's get sewing. So we've got nesting seams there. I'm not going to pin it. I'm just making sure that they nest before I put it into the sewing machine. When I sew, I'm going to sew right over these marks that I drew in because that's supposed to be where the 1/4 inch is. Get down here. I'm going to make sure the corner is nestled nicely before I finish it up. Take my pins out one side, the side that I sewed. Take a peek. Ah, beauteous. Beauteous. Okay. Make sure this one is nested. Right. See. Not bad. There we go. That's block 18. Hold on. There's block 18. So I'll take pictures of these when I add them to the, oops, I'm sorry, there. Add them to the lineup. I'm gonna start. No, I'm not. Never mind. I said I thought I was gonna start putting it together in the rows, but I want to make sure my blocks are where I want them so I don't have too many of the same color or same fabric together. But hopefully next week I'll have at least 3 blocks done. And I hope you're enjoying this. Now, I think I'm going to start my weekend and get back to someone on Monday. I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend and have a lot of fun. I know I will tomorrow because I'm going to be playing with Legos. You know where I am if you need me. Have a great day. Till next week.